Australian Aviation Podcast, the official podcast of Australian Aviation, unpacking the latest insights, developments and issues impacting Australia's aviation sector.
Hello everybody, my name is Adam Thorne and welcome to the Australian Aviation Podcast. I am joined as ever by, I think, less co-host, more dopey sidekick, Jake Nelson. Jake, welcome to the show. How are you?
Takes one to know one, Adam.
Right, before we go into the usual shout-outs, I believe you have some personal news, Jake.
Yes, I have been elected president of the United States.
You haven't. What is your
look,
personal
they
news?
had a
Yeah.
do-over. I put my hand up, threw my hat in the ring, and they decided to give me a go.
If you became president of any country or prime minister, I'd immediately leave.
To go to that country because it would automatically be a lot better.
What is your personal news?
Well, I will be appearing in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, the musical, in July.
What character are you playing?
I will be playing Mr. Salt, the father of Veruca Salt, and I will also be playing Charlie's grandpa George.
Because 2 roles is quite big.
2 roles.
Yeah.
It's not the first time that I've played 2 roles in the one musical.
No.
But Mr. Salt and Grandpa George, you will notice, are never on stage.
One of them like a Russian oligarch or something.
A Russian peanut billionaire.
Okay. Yeah.
I believe in the original sort of book and movie, he was British, and he was British in the West End version. But for the Broadway and touring versions, they changed him to be Russian for.
So just recap. So he was a British character, and they've turned him Russian.
Yes.
That's awful. You can't do that.
Yeah. I mean the poor Russians.
Yeah, but in today's geopolitical situation, I'm not sure if it's a good idea to be playing a Russian character.
Well, that's your opinion.
Okay, we've done some personal news for you. I would say before we go into any more shout-outs, we've had this cyclone Alfred. It's been steaming its way towards Australia. It hit Brisbane, which is where our friends at Virgin Australia are based. Everybody at Virgin Australia, I hope you're all doing all right. I know it was an ex-tropical cyclone in the end. Like it didn't.
A tropical low when it hit the coastline.
Yeah, it's still bad though.
It was still pretty big.
It was still pretty
apparently
big.
the biggest single day of rainfall for Brisbane in like 50 years.
Really?
Yeah.
It's pretty bad. Yeah, so we do hope we'll talk about this a little bit more later on. But I do hope everybody's okay. Particularly James is in the Gold Coast. That was like right on the
Yes.
right on the epicenter. So I hope you're all holding up.
There's been
okay.
apparently the beaches in the Gold Coast just been mostly washed away.
But you hate the Gold Coast anyway, so you're probably pleased with that, aren't you?
Well, look, something to take him down. I mean, speaking of different places that aren't here, the 2 of us will be at the Avalon Air Show in 2 weeks.
We will be. So if you are at the Avalon Air Show and you want to come and say hello, don't if you're weird, which will be a lot of people listening to the show. But if you are a normal person, do come and say hello. Jake does autographs and stuff as well, don't you?
Look,
Or maybe a
not
photo
on,
taken with you.
Yeah, I don't do autographs on checks. I've learned that from the hard way.
Yeah. Would you charge for that though? Like if someone came to you and said, like, "Oh, I would like a picture of you," is that a free service, or are you happy to?
Depends how many.
Yeah.
But yeah, hopefully we'll. If the fates allow, we'll be doing a podcast as well from Avalon.
Will be, yeah.
And we'll be there on the business facing days. Seeing all the planes and probably running around like headless chickens.
Yeah.
So look out for us if you're going to the trade days at the Avalon Air Show because we will be there.
Yeah, nice. We got any other shout outs? Any more announcements, anything like that? Or are we going to steam into the news?
Should probably steam into the news. We've made a lot of people cranky by not steaming into the news.
Right, well, let's uncrank those people. What we starting with?
It's impossible to uncrank our readers, Adam.
Well, that is true. What are we starting with?
So we should, as you said, Adam, Tropical Cyclone Alfred and all the rest. It's been hell of a week if you're a nervous flyer. I mean, you've had Cyclone Alfred up north. There was that video of a Qantas Dash 8 being like blown around as it tried to land on the Brisbane Airport runway. You've had there was a flight from Brisbane to Sydney where the pilot experienced chest pains, and the plane had to get a priority landing at Sydney Airport. I believe the pilot is okay, so that's good. defibrillator was not used.
And what we're doing is we're putting together a lot of different stories, right?
Yes, yeah. We've also had before the plane even got into the air, in Avalon Airport, a teenager allegedly boarded it with a shotgun and a fake bomb. So that would have been a harrowing experience. Apparently taken down by a sheep shearer from rural Victoria. So hats off to him. Shout out to, I think, Barry Clark is the name.
The quotes from Barry Clark are absolutely extraordinary. Can we read them out?
Yeah, Barry Clark. He's a shearer. He apparently got a welcome party from Jetstar staff on Friday when he got into Sydney. Let me see. What did he say?
So basically, what's happened is background. Allegedly, this person has snuck through a hole in the fence, if that's right, and has tried to get on the plane. Allegedly, carrying some kind of gun. Apparently, the pilot called over the tannoy that there is someone on the plane with a gun. Whether that actually happened, exactly how it happened, we don't know. And this brave person, supposedly, and I have to be very careful with my language for legal concerns.
Reportedly,
wrestled this person to the ground. The quote, this Barry, what a great name for a hero.
Barry Clark, yeah.
Barry Clark. You don't mess with Barry. Give us the quote. You got it up that Barry said.
Before we knew it, he said, before we knew it, a shotgun appeared, and I was worried about it being shot. So all I could do was push the flight attendant out of the way, get the gun out of the way, break that gun, and throw it down the stairs, and then put him in a hold, throw him to the ground until the police came. That was all he could do.
Oh, that's extraordinary, isn't it? Yeah. I mean, round of applause to Barry, our aviation
Shout out to
hero.
Barry Clark. Barry, if you're listening to the Australian Aviation Podcast, once the dust is settled and once all the legals squared away. If you want to come on the podcast, we'd love to hear your story. We'd love to get Barry Clark on this podcast. Barry Clark, the hero shearer who reportedly wrestled this alleged gunman to the ground. We would love to hear from you.
But I would say, so in terms of this, obviously this happened at Avalon Airport. Obviously that's a regular day of flying. We're going to have the Avalon event in a few weeks. They are doing an investigation into what happened at Avalon, because obviously the questions as to why or how somebody was able to get through a fence, get into an airport. Have they not been looking more broadly as well in terms of other airports?
Yeah, so
and what their security situation is.
The Home Affairs Minister, Tony Burke, has written to a few airports around the country, I think mostly major regional airports, basically telling them you need to conduct some safety assessments, you need to check your safety. Apparently, this alleged attacker got through a hole in the fence at Avalon Airport. Been charged with a range of offences, including possession of a firearm, carrying out a bomb hoax, endangering the safety of an aircraft, and unlawfully taking control of the aircraft. Excuse me. The CEO of Avalon Airport said that it's fully operational still, with enhanced security measures in place. The CEO of the Australian Airports Association, Simon Westaway, has said that, quote, safety and security remains paramount at Australian airports, he said, it should be noted that last Thursday's incident was an extremely rare event and Australia's aviation industry is incredibly safe.
Which is true.
Possibly more than we can say for America's aviation industry at the moment.
Right. Is that a link to something else or just a general
No,
comment
it's just a general comment on the state of American aviation. There's been, whether or not there's been more serious aviation incidents than normal lately, or whether there's just increased focus on them at the moment, based on everything that's going on with the FAA and a certain space billionaire.
Right,
But certainly people in America have been kind of reporting that they're feeling unsafe to fly. But on the topic of flight safety, going back for a moment to that medical incident that happened in the air en route from Brisbane to Sydney, we reached out to the AIPA, the Australian International Pilots Association, which is the pilots union that covers the majority of Qantas pilots, because they last year and the year before, they've been for a little while now pushing back against this potential idea that some international carriers have been considering of reducing the number of pilots, of single pilot operations in the cockpit and reduced crew flights, and because autopilots are so crash hot amazing at the moment, there's been suggestions, well, maybe we don't need so many pilots anymore. And on the one hand, it's understandable why they might think that, particularly because of the talent shortage that's still going on. But the AIPA has basically, we reached out to them and they sort of pointed to this incident where the captain experienced chest pains, that the first officer managed to get the plane safely down. Captain Andrew Mitchell, the president of the AIPA, has basically said this is just the latest in a long line of incidents that illustrates basically the critical importance of having two pilots on the flight deck. He said there will always be pressure from sections of the industry to achieve savings by switching to a single pilot, but the worst case scenarios just don't bear thinking about. He said if a pilot is incapacitated for any reason, passengers should not have to entrust their lives to an AI system.
Yeah, I completely agree. So there is a lot of talk in the industry, kind of it's a little bit separately, that we could have these electric vertical takeoff and landing vehicles that wouldn't have pilots in them, that essentially would fly themselves. I don't think that will ever happen. I don't think a person will ever get in an aircraft without a pilot of some sort. I think it's a mad idea. And so this going to the idea of why do we have two pilots in a kind of large airliner, it is exactly for these rare situations, because yes, technically I reckon most aircraft could fly themselves automatically with the technology we've got available, but you need one human being there, and you obviously need another human being there in case something happens to the first one. So in this instance here, we saw this, this could have been a crisis, and so you need to have that second person. The industry or some airlines will push back on this because clearly it's one of the biggest costs involved in the flight of the pilots. But like they say, it doesn't bear thinking about. I would say actually within Australia, there's also been a lot of pushback from the airlines. Alan Joyce, before he left, he also basically said this is an absolutely crazy idea. You can't do away with having a first officer, or you can't do away with having those extra people. So yeah, it does illustrate that. I would never get on an aircraft without a pilot. Would you, Jake?
Look, the little EVTOLs, maybe they need to undergo stringent safety testing. In theory, it is kind of difficult from the idea of self-driving cars. Because there's fewer things, at least in theory, in the sky that these air taxis could hit. You don't have Robbo from down the road tooling around the sky in his sky ute.
Robbo? Do you live near someone called Robbo?
I don't know. It's just the first name that came to mind.
Yeah.
But you don't have people. The sky is not.
Yeah.
It's particularly at low levels, is not full of people, amateur pilots like everyone's driving on the road. Like a big problem with self-driving cars is that it's kind of like they have to all be self-driving, or none of them can be self-driving because humans and self-driving cars don't necessarily mix. So maybe they'd have to be. I'd need to know that there was stringent safety testing, and I think these companies that are trying it would have that. I did get into we had at the Australian Aviation Summit last year from who was it? Was it Whisk?
Whisk, yeah.
Whisk. We had a kind of a demonstrator, like a virtual reality thing, where you got to put a
and it was incredible. Like, I went on that simulator and I thought it was absolutely amazing. The technology is amazing, and I don't doubt they can make that work. It's just whether you would ever have that flight without a pilot or somebody that was able to take the controls in some way. That is a thing I find difficult to accept. I don't think I would ever get on an aircraft without a pilot of some sort. I would be very uncomfortable being in a car without a driver, or being able to drive that car. I'm happy to be in a train, a driverless train, like the Metro, the new Metro in Sydney is driverless. But that's a bit different though, because it's on rails and it's in a tunnel, and you can get out.
It's also like centrally controlled. There's someone sitting at it. I believe there's someone like sitting at a computer somewhere controlling the train. It's not like a robot train.
Yeah, and there's nothing for it to really crash into when it's on rails, so it does make complete sense. But I find it very hard that passengers will ever accept that. The argument has been made to me previously, well, you say that the passengers won't accept that, but maybe back in the day they would never have gone into an airplane in the first place. They'd have gone, it's insane. But I think it's a bit different.
Well, it's all the way back in the day, the first trains people were worried, good heavens, the trains will go so fast that people will faint and die and their organs will explode or whatever.
Well, of course, this choo-choo is a bit too bloody quick for me, old bean. Well, I don't believe in that.
Yeah, and I think the first cars in I think some American cities at least, or possibly London somewhere, the first cars somewhere could only go like at walking pace, and they had to have a guy walking in front of them, like with a flag or something to warn you, there's a car coming.
I'd love that, to be fair. I mean, excellent.
Yeah. So look, it all depends on how stringently they can perform these safety tests. But now, as we've said, it's been a wild week in the skies here in Australia and over in America. Here in Australia as well, and this is a semi-segue, we've had CASA having to set up basically exclusion zones, I think, for Russian rocket debris. You cover this one for Space Connect, and we used it on Australian Aviation as well.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm trying to think. We'd have a couple of debris stories. Obviously, your man Elon, he the Starship
blew up another.
Yeah, you're
rocket.
So negative.
He blew up another rocket. He blew up another one of his silly rockets over Florida and forced the diversions of flights because nobody wants to get hit by rocket debris.
No, mate, it's just classic. I hate all this stuff, and it's like Elon Musk, SpaceX, another failure, and it's all just so biased, right? But you are technically correct, but how
many NASA rockets have exploded in spectacular fireballs, forcing the diversion of flights? At least recently.
The background here is that the way the SpaceX's theory is that every time you launch a new rocket for the first time or in its early stages, it's almost certain to explode. In fact, there's almost never been a first flight of a rocket that hasn't exploded because space is hard and it's difficult. Now, what Elon has done, perhaps madly, is kind of lean into
Definitely madly.
But he's
insane.
Yeah, the
man is insane.
And he said that what we're going to do, the way we're going to develop this rocket, is that we're going to make like relatively cheap prototypes. I mean, it's the same rocket, but it probably doesn't have all the same stuff inside it, And basically, we're going to send it up and see what happens. And if it blows up, we will sort of learn more from that than if it didn't. Like, ironically, when it goes wrong, that they learn stuff, and they're going to do it until they iron out all the problems. So they started off doing, I think, a couple of test flights a year. Then they moved to 4 or 5. They're trying now to do 25 a year. So you've got this situation where it's going up, it's being tested. And I think around half the times they've done it now, it's blown up. And this is the second time it's blown up in a row. Now, to be fair to them, they have obviously planned everything out with the FAA, with all of the various safety authorities, and it kind of flies through apparently like a pre-planned corridor. But nonetheless, what happened, and you are technically correct with the way you put it.
The best kind of correct.
Blew up into like a gazillion different places and kind of streaked across the sky like fireworks. In fact, like nothing you've ever seen. It was even
except since January, since the last time that this happened.
Yeah. Now, obviously, SpaceX is going to be like, you got nothing to worry about. Absolutely fine. It's all been worked out. However, that's not what 4 airports in Florida thought, who had to immediately shut down all operations and stop all takeoff and landings for 90 minutes as the footage came of these things streaking through the sky. Now, the reason why this is relevant, particularly to us, is Qantas as well talked about having to make delays or potentially cancellations to some of its flights due to the SpaceX's smaller Falcon 9s taking off. Now, they didn't necessarily explode, but every time a rocket goes up, you have to actually get out of the way. So what we would have thought a couple of years ago, almost to be the stuff of science fiction and stuff that's mad, is now becoming a legitimate concern for aviation. We're going to be in a situation soon where we're sending up more rockets than ever before, and, airports and aircraft have to be ready for this. I'm sure that the science is that, the fragments of rockets are burning up into the atmosphere. They look pretty close. Like, if I was in an airplane and I saw that above me, I wouldn't be happy. I would say that
you would finally agree that Elon Musk maybe shouldn't be doing this so often.
Wow, no, I mean, he's got to try. He's all this stuff is like, I want to make life interplanetary. Why? All the other planets are horrible. I don't want to live on Mars.
Fix our own planet first.
Now, you've got a point there. You've got a point. But you've got to love his ambition. He is weird. I don't doubt he's
No, I
weird.
don't love his ambition. I think he's a maniac. It's like that old Tom Lehrer song. Once the rockets go up, who cares where they come down? That's not my department, says Werner von Braun.
Right, I've got no interest in going on a rocket or living on Mars or Jupiter or any of these places. But I do think you got to try and do this stuff. Now, admittedly, and I also think, yes, they are exploding and that is bad, but it's not necessarily failing. They almost want them to explode, which admittedly sounds even worse.
It does sound even worse.
It does sound even worse, doesn't it? Yeah, I want to move on.
And he's going in there and he's basically waging war on the FAA for having the temerity to try and regulate his space launches.
But here's the thing: he's basically in the government now, so there's nothing they can do. Do you see what he's done here? He's been quite clever.
He's going through and he's ripping the copper out of the walls and helping himself to government contracts is what he's doing. I wrote about this in my op-ed for Australian Aviation magazine. He and his band of 20-year-old hackers just going in there are going to make the flying less safe in America. They are making flying less safe. And, going in there and laying off all these staff from the FAA in such a haphazard way. They need these people there at the Federal Aviation Administration to make sure planes don't fall out of the sky. You can't just go in there and slash and burn willy-nilly because that's how accidents happen. Right.
No, I mean, yeah, that's... No, I hear you, but he does make you very angry. He does make you quite visibly angry.
Extremely, yes.
Right, so what
I don't like him.
No, I think we've got that. So Jake's gone outside. He's sorted himself out. He had a bit of a quiet moment of reflection and calmed down. We're not going to mention the E word. What different news story are we talking about next?
We should probably talk about Virgin Australia because they've had a busy week.
That
has not involved planes doing anything that they're not supposed to.
Yeah.
So this came basically in pretty rapid succession last week on the same day. Firstly, we saw white smoke from Virgin Australia headquarters.
How did we forget to talk about this so far? Yes.
White smoke from Virgin Australia headquarters.
Yeah.
Not because it was on fire, but because they have, in the manner of a pope, selected their new CEO.
The Pope.
In the manner of the Pope. They should have a sequel movie to Conclave. That movie Conclave. Have you seen it?
No.
I've had a friend who's seen it. Apparently it's nice. It's a
to confirm, because maybe actually, at any point was there a chimney with smoke that came out of their headquarters in Brisbane?
No, but there should have been. There should have been, like they do for popes.
Right. Yeah.
But I believe it is white smoke when they do pick a new pope. That's the signal. Anyway, they've picked a new CEO. And this has been a long time coming.
Yeah.
This Jayne Hrdlicka, I think more than a year ago now, announced that she was stepping down as CEO. They've taken a year. She's sort of remained in the job for the past year. We've sort of been talking about this a fair bit, her long goodbye. But finally, after one or two false starts, they have picked Dave Emerson, their chief commercial officer, to serve as the next CEO. So he is stepping into the role on the 14th of March. He was a guy who they brought over as chief this was Bain Capital brought him in as CCO in 2021. He has 25 years of experience in the aviation and tourism industries. He is, he's been with Virgin for 4 years now, and he is going to step in and become the new CEO, having performed presumably well in that CCO role. Because if he hadn't performed well, they probably wouldn't be promoting him. So he says, quote, today we are Australia's most loved airline, delivering industry-leading operational performance and record financial results. Yeah, Dave, not hard. Bar is low. I will continue the transformation journey.
We want to get this guy on our podcast, man. We've got to be like wooing him at this point.
I will continue the transformation journey begun under Jayne's outstanding leadership. The strategy we set as we emerged from administration several years ago is now paying off. He said, as we return to long-haul international flying, and we'll get to that in a moment, and innovate our domestic services, we can open greater choice and even better value travel experiences for our customers, including more opportunities to reward them for their loyalty. Importantly, it also creates new opportunities for our team. So they finally have found someone to replace the inimitable, perhaps the irreplaceable Jayne Hrdlicka.
Well, we'll get to in a second her kind of legacy and the replacement's prospects. But this news came very quickly after another piece of big news.
Very quickly before, in fact.
Because
later that same day, we got white smoke.
More white
smoke.
For Christ's sake, mate, people just smoke in here, aren't they?
Yeah,
smoke everywhere.
We got white smoke from the International Air Services Commission, announcing that Virgin had been granted 28 flights per week to Doha.
So what this basically means is that now Virgin have pretty much passed every single hurdle that was required for them both to be partially bought out by Qatar, or for Qatar to buy 25%, and also for them to launch these 28, whatever it is, flights to Doha. So basically, it's all done now. They have won total victory. And so, so now they...
Essentially.
Yeah.
So, look, there's still... The ACCC needs to make its final determination.
But they've already
and you know, they need to get their schedule approved. They need to get timetable approval. But those are essentially formalities at this point.
Yeah.
The Foreign Investment Review Board has approved the purchase of 25% of Virgin by Qatar Airways. The ACCC has signaled that it's not planning to oppose these wet lease flights to Doha, and the IASC has now awarded these 28 flights per week. Virgin will have that capacity to use with these wet lease 777-300s from Qatar.
Yeah, it would. We have spoken about this before, but on the surface, if you were to look at Jayne's time in charge, it would look like she's done an absolutely outstanding job. And in many ways, she's almost made it look easy because she inherited an absolute mess, a dumpster fire. The airline went into administration, was bought out by Bain Capital, right? So she has to, I mean, Paul Scurrah was technically CEO for a few weeks after that, but she effectively was the first CEO.
Came in from Jetstar, I believe.
Yeah. So she effectively was kind of the first CEO of this new regime. She took over an airline that had been losing literally billions. A basket case. They've been losing billions every single year. That got involved in a very ill thought out kind of war with Qantas in order to try to effectively take on Qantas as a kind of a full service big airline, which it very much lost. She basically had to create a strategy that would see it somehow become profitable. She had to do this having had this nightmare of administration, COVID at the same time as well, both at the same time. She had, when she started, a significantly reduced fleet of aircraft, not just losing the 777s, but having significantly less 737s. She had to rebuild this whole thing.
Tiger was
Tiger had gone.
They had the ATRs that they had to get rid of.
And she also, prior to starting there, had a difficult relationship personally with the unions that she had to sort out. So she was handed every single bad hand that you could be handed. Most airline CEOs had a nervous breakdown trying to deal with COVID itself. Imagine dealing with that and everything else. She also had this problem that in Australia, COVID was very much a stop-start thing. So there was a period as a country we thought we'd beaten COVID and it was all done and they were getting back to normal. And then suddenly we had another series of lockdowns, which made everything very difficult. So she had possibly the hardest remit of any airline CEO ever, right? You can make that as a very good argument. The idea that, what has it been now, 4 or 5 years on, she's come out of this. The airline is making good money. Now, admittedly, not as much as Qantas, but 400, 500 million or whatever.
Not to be sneezed at, I'd like that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So she's making good money. She's quietly rebuilt the fleet, significantly increased the size of the fleet. She's clearly played a part, along with other people, in getting this Qatar deal over the line, which has the potential to be transformative because it immediately, or very nearly immediately, gives them access to big wide-body aircraft that can fly to Doha and therefore offer flights via code shares onto the rest of the world. They also now have the partial backing of one of the biggest, richest airlines in the world, so they've actually got some sort of firepower against Qantas now. They have kind of surprised almost everyone in making this kind of mid-market hybrid strategy work, where they're not quite a budget airline. They're also not trying to be Qantas. They're somewhere in the middle. They've got different ticket prices and different options, but they've made it work, and they've gambled almost on the fact that people want a little bit more reliability, maybe even a Jetstar. They probably think Qantas offering isn't quite right. So that's worked. It does seem from the outside that their staff seem pretty happy. It seems like, relatively speaking, they are a happy team there. And you would look at that and say that you can say, oh, wow, it all just kind of, what did she really do? But in reality, every single box is ticked. Without going into too much detail, she also did that during a period where her husband died, where she had this personal tragedy. How on earth do you deal with all these different things and come out of it like she did? I mean, you would say on the surface she's done a ridiculously good job, and she can now leave Australian aviation, not us, obviously, with her head.
She should come to Australian aviation and talk to us on the podcast.
If you are listening, Jayne,
if you're listening.
Yeah, if you do want to come on the show and talk about your experiences being CEO of Virgin Australia and anything else, we'd love to have you. Whenever you want, we'd love to have you. And it says she's done, it's job done for her point of view, and I think her legacy really is probably the most successful Virgin Australia CEO is secured. We've now got a new person,
Dave Emerson. I
love it's a Dave as well. I love not a Dave, like a Dave. You're solid with a Dave. Anyway, so you got Dave. Dave's come in.
Davo.
Davo's come in, and he's now got a challenge on his hands. And Jayne's done a very, very good job, so he has to continue that on.
And we'll have to probably at some point during his tenure manage this mooted IPO that's been floating around for some time.
This is what I said. So obviously they are, I'm not sure exactly when the formalities happen, but Qatar is or will imminently take 25% of Virgin. However, Bain Capital own, I don't think it's quite 75% because Branson's got a little
most
bit.
of it.
Yeah, they basically still own most of it. They've, said previously they want to float Virgin Australia on the ASX. So that's going to be a challenge now as well for him, because you had this real post-COVID boom for aviation. It's stagnating industry-wide, I think, a little bit now. I think that those kind of great days earlier are over. So they have to go now and make the case to the market that you should invest in Virgin Australia. Rumour has it they wanted to do this float a year ago or 18 months ago, but they couldn't really get it off the ground. So that's now
ironically.
Ironically. That's now going to be his challenge. Also, at the same time, is keeping that kind of good work going. So he's got a tough ask of him too. I don't think he's previously been an airline CEO, unlike Jayne. So he's going to have to. That's going to be a big step up as well. He's got a big task on his hands.
He has, and we wish him all the best. It's good to have a robust aviation industry. As we've seen previously, the more airlines that are operating, the lower fares tend to get. And certainly you could argue that he has, that Jayne Hrdlicka, I should say, has done a better job, and that Virgin has done a better job at navigating these tricky waters than, I don't know, top of my head, Rex.
Is that a link to a Rex story or not?
No, it's just Rex thought it could be the next Virgin, and it ended up being the next Virgin when it went into administration.
Very well. So, what else are we talking about, Jake? What's next?
Well, probably a brief mention. Speaking of CEO turnover, we've got Greg Foran.
Oh, yes.
Foran?
Yes.
Greg is leaving Air New Zealand.
Bit of background on Greg Foran. So basically, I don't think he previously had any aviation background, but he was like a big dog executive in America.
Yeah, he ran Walmart US as the CEO.
Big job.
And had previously held some senior positions here in Woolworths. Not here. We don't work for Woolworths.
So he's basically, he's Kiwi.
But here in Australia. Yeah, he's originally a Kiwi.
So he's originally a Kiwi. He's gone and got one of the biggest jobs probably in global business. You could argue, like, you're running Walmart or whatever he was doing there. So he doesn't know anything about aviation. But they're like, you know what? Boy's done good. We're going to get him back. He's come back home. Probably just needs to learn. First 6 months, get your feet under the table. Learn what those big things that take off and fly. Those are aeroplanes. Like, I think they brought him in knowing it would take some time to him for adjust, but he was obviously this kind of brilliant business mind. About 6 weeks or something into the job, world shuts down, COVID happens, biggest crisis in the airline's history. So he was thrown into one hell of a deep end there, having to make all these massive decisions, probably not necessarily having the faintest idea what he was doing, but obviously having to rely on his team to advise him. So he's had a very, very stressful sort of 4 or 5 years in the job.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Dame Therese Walsh, the chair of Air New Zealand, said as much. She said, quote, "Greg has always displayed exceptional leadership and grit, not only guiding Air New Zealand through global aviation's most significant crisis, but at the same time also maintaining the airline's tradition of innovation, strong culture, and care for our country." She said, perhaps his most notable contribution has been managing significant global supply chain challenges. These began with COVID-19 and continue today with the engine issues materially impacting both our Boeing and Airbus fleets. So she says that his relentless focus and global profile have been instrumental in mitigating the consequential disruptions on our customers. So he's going to stay on until 20th of October to help manage the transition.
Another long goodbye.
But they are going to be Air New Zealand is going to be looking for a new CEO actively, a global search, as they always say, to find his replacement. Depending on how long it takes and when the next New Zealand election is, Christopher Luxon might, be in need of work at some point.
Who's Christopher Luxon?
Well, the current Prime Minister of New Zealand.
Oh yeah, because they got rid of Jacinta, didn't they? Yeah, and then there was somebody else.
They voted. He defeated.
Guy.
He defeated the. I don't remember his name. The guy who replaced Jacinta Ardern. But he was previously the CEO of Air New Zealand. Greg Foran replaced him. Yes.
So the previous CEO of Air New Zealand is
now the Prime Minister of New Zealand. Yes.
That's amazing.
So if he loses the next election, he might. Maybe they can get him back.
Yeah. No.
Yes. So Greg Foran is Foran. Greg,
the Kiwis speak weird anyway. God knows how you say it.
Greg is leaving Air New Zealand. Having steered it through COVID, and
flown it.
Yeah, flown it through COVID, and he's going to be taking on some new opportunities or some such, the sort of thing they always say.
Yeah.
So it'd be interesting to see who Air New Zealand gets in next. Here, Jayne Hrdlicka is probably not going to be busy very soon.
Well, she probably wants some time. Well, to be fair, she probably would be able to have it. If it's October, you could have 6 months off or whatever.
See if Jayne's interested.
Yeah, no.
If anyone they've got significant supply chain challenges. If anyone can turn it around over there.
Yeah, no. There you go. Insider tip if you are watching, Dame Teresa or whatever. Right, we got one more story to talk about before we wrap things up.
Yeah. So, Adam, you're from England.
I am indeed. I am from His Majesty's green and pleasant lands, the motherland, as some of you call it. Very proud as well.
Sure. How much does it generally cost you to get home?
It's interesting. It depends whether you go in out of season or out of season or in season and peak season, whatever. I would say if you the cheapest you could get it, if you're really trying, you can probably get return flights on a good airline today, $800-900 of His Majesty's English. So that's $1,800 dingo dollars.
Okay.
Money,
and how long would it take you to get back?
Well, around about 24 hours, including the stopover, depending on how you do it.
Sure. Now, would you pay, say, $49,500?
$49,500 dingo dollars. Yeah.
To fly back to London.
Yeah.
Over the course of 14 days.
No, that's mad. God, no. Why would I do that? And what would I just have in like a layover, just like on the?
Well,
aircraft?
No, you'd have several layovers.
Go on.
You would have several layovers on a chartered Qantas A330.
Right.
You would be stopping in such locations, for example, in order as Darwin, Singapore, Kolkata, Colombo, Cairo, Rome, and Toulouse. You would be going to all of those locations on your way home to London on an A330.
Yeah, it's like there's a twist to this. Like maybe there's something more to this. What could it be, Jake?
No, it's just that's how international airfares are now these days, Adam.
Really?
That's just how the service is.
So,
It's
so they
disgraceful.
just decided to add all this extra expense in.
Well, so, yeah, I mean, if you're flying with Scoot, no, it's this is a special charter tour.
Yeah.
You described it earlier in the office as a cruise in the sky, which I pilfered
That's
for the
exactly what
headline.
it is.
But it's called the Pioneering Spirit of the Kangaroo Route Tour.
Right.
And it will it's organized by this tour company called Captain's Choice. And basically it's recreating, is near enough, the original kangaroo route that was operated by Qantas in 1947 using its old Lockheed Constellation. It's not the exact same route. So the original route was via Darwin, Singapore, Kolkata, Karachi, Cairo, and Tripoli. This one is going to different places, but close enough. And it is it's a $49,500 trip, and that includes business class meals for all the passengers. It includes luxury hotel stays. It includes activities on the ground like a tour of the Airbus factory in Toulouse.
$49,000
per
each.
person, twin share.
Well, I mean, I suppose it depends on the hotels they're putting you up on. The problem is
it's like the Ritz-Carlton in Singapore, and all these
I get it. So
big
obviously
luxury places.
This is for somebody who's got a bit of money, wants to explore the world, and is obviously an aviation aficionado and an enthusiast. So I get what they're trying to do. But when you're on a cruise, you stop off at port. It's a lot nicer experience than having to, ram your way for security and all the waiting around and all that kind of stuff. So it kind of makes sense. Obviously, I've been on a few cruises, actually, side story. So that kind of makes sense. I see what they're doing, but one, I don't think is actually going to be that much fun. And secondly, that is an extraordinary amount of money to pay.
It is.
It really is a lot of money. Bear in mind that I could do the same trip for, 5% or less than that, and just do it considerably quicker. So I don't know what, I get it.
It's not the destination, Adam. It's the journey.
But what I would say, if they did it in a super constellation or something, I could see
that would be horrible.
I know.
Have you seen the inside? Have you been inside a super constellation? It's a remarkable old plane, but there's none of the modern creature comforts. And
but they could do it up, couldn't they? They could we get vintage cars. They could do it up inside and make it more luxurious inside than it would have been. Maybe sort out the safety issues. It meant it wasn't anywhere near as good as a modern jet.
And where are you going to find a working super constellation?
Well, that's not my problem. I'm not putting it on.
But it's and it doesn't fit as many people. So this it's not as comfortable. Doesn't fit as many people. Isn't as safe. Would be slower. This is going to be an A330-300. They're chartering it. The business class seats are already sold out. Everyone gets business class meals, but the business class seats are already sold out.
Right.
They're only selling 150 economy seats. Right. So basically, they're only selling the window and the aisle seats. They're not selling the middle seats to give everyone room, and so it's not everyone crammed in like sardines. But no more than 186 passengers. So it's not a cheap experience,
No.
but if you have $99,000 to spare, and you and a friend or a partner want to fly all the way to London in 14 days, stopping over in several places on the way. There's worse things you can do with your money. There's better things you can do with your money, but there's worse.
Yeah. No. I think it's I wouldn't do it, but I see what they're trying to do there. Right, that's probably all we got time for this week. And have you got anything else at all, or any more shout outs, or anything you want to say before we end this?
No, that probably covers it. Look out for look out for Australian Aviation Magazine.
We've not even seen it ourselves.
It's a mysterious. Perhaps the Dread Enoch took it as his last act of revenge. But we have yet to get it ourselves, but it should be landing on doorsteps at some point soon.
At some point soon. So look out for Australian Aviation Magazine. We've got stories going up on the website from the magazine, and look out for us in 2 weeks' time at the Avalon Air Show. We will be, of course, back here the same time next week. But sorry, that's your line. Yeah, I was going to say that. Back off. What he said. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Goodbye.